Okay, gang. So now what we're going to do is we're going to work on the process of configuring a client so we can later on add it to a domain controller. Now, similar to even working on a server, some of the things you have to make sure is that the client has a user-friendly workstation name or host name, as well as it has an IP address that you can use in your network. So that's what we're about to do. What we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to give this computer a host name, and then we're going to give it an IP address just to make sure it's ready to work on our network. Here we go. Now you notice the username that I used to get into this machine was TechDude. Traditionally, you will have a different administrator's name on clients than you have for the administrator of the server and the network itself. So let's go ahead and look at the host name of the machine the two different ways. So first, we're going to go through the GUI. Right click on this PC and properties. And here we see that extremely long default host name that's put in when you do a regular installation of Windows. And essentially is just trying to make sure that it comes up with a unique name that's not the same as another machine on the network. Let's go ahead and see what it looks like when you use the GUI. And when you use the GUI, you go down here to what is either called the run option or the search option. The reason us techs call it the run option is you can actually perform specific commands in that area in addition to simply searching for files. So I'm going to use the GUI to find out the host name again of the machine. To use the GUI is just, the CLI to find the host name of the machine. So to use the CLI, I type in CMD, which brings up the command prompt application. I'm going to make this font larger so I can see it. And then I'm going to use some small commands just so I can navigate the screen a little bit easier. So I'm going to do a CD, which is change directory to the root. And then I'm going to do a CLS, which is clear my screen. Then I'm going to do a IP config, host name. And we see that strange host name is definitely there. So let's go ahead and go through the process of giving this machine a host name that we can use. I'm going to click on change settings. Then I'm going to click on change again. Do not put the host name up here. You have to hit change again. Now you can put in the host name you want. I'm just going to call it PC1. Actually, I'm going to call it PC20 because I'm going to identify this with its IP address. It'll be easier for me to remember in future work. So I hit the OK button. It lets you know that this machine will not reflect those settings appropriately until the computer is actually restarted. So after that, you just hit OKs and close a couple of times. Now it's giving you an opportunity to restart now, or you can restart later. I'm going to restart later because as long as I'm working with the host name identity, I want to go ahead and change the IP identity before I move on. So I'll do restart later. Now also notice in the machine properties, it literally says that this computer still has the old name, but it's going to get the new name after the machine restarts. Now let's go ahead and change the IP address of this computer. So first, let's see how the computer is getting an IP address. We can do it two different ways. We can go way down here to the network and sharing icon. I'm going to right click on it, open Network and Sharing Center. Let's close this other window out just because it's not neat. Must have clicked that by accident. Then I'm going to go to change adapter settings. Here's the icon that represents the network interface. I'll right click on it and go to properties. I'll click on the word Internet Protocol version 4, not the check mark. That will turn off the TCP/IP stack. Then hit properties. This lets you know that this computer will talk to a DHCP server to get an IP address every time it turns on. It also lets you know that this machine will be classified as getting its IP address dynamically, which means it can change. The IP address can change anytime this computer is on or anytime the computer is restarting. Let's see what this information looks like in the CLI. I'm going to clear my screen and type in ipconfig. This is the basic command to see the small settings concerning network configurations on your machine. We see here that it is getting some IP address information, but it's actually getting it from the domain controller, or my fault, DHCP server. We're going to go ahead and change this IP address. So it's the IP address that we can use for our experiments. In addition to that, we're going to change the DNS settings and default gateway settings that match our network. So to do that, you'll put a dot in the radio button. That means you click on these circles. We'll use the following IP address. So whatever I put in here is going to stay set up for this computer, no matter how many times it restarts. So I'm going to put in an IP address that will work on the networks that we're configuring. I'm going to make this IP address 20. Kind of matched it with the name so I can keep track of this computer. I'm going to give it a different subnet mask. And then I'm going to give it a make pretend default gateway. It really doesn't need it for any of our experiments. Now I'm going to give it a DNS server that's on our network. I think I named it .10. Now, after I hit OK, this IP address will be locked into this machine. So no matter when it restarts, the IP address will be there. To double check, I can open back up that GUI interface. So it shows in the GUI that IP address is there, the DNS settings and the default gateway settings are there. Let's see what it looks like in the command line. Now, I still have the old settings from the first time I typed in ipconfig. Let me erase all of this off my screen and type it in again. Notice it has the IP address settings I want and the default gateway settings I want. There's another command or a switch or an extender or a modifier, whatever you like to call it. So you can type on ipconfig to see more information. Let me show you what it looks like. This means show you all of the network settings on the machine. Now we notice that this machine has a static IP address. It's no longer using DHCP. And we see the DNS server's IP address is the one that we set up. So now what we get to do is we get to restart this machine. There's different ways that we can do it. If we wanted to, in the command line, we could type this command in. What that will do is it will restart this computer for us, or we can just restart it by using the GUI. Start menu, and the power button. Now it's going to ask for some updates. Since it's going to try to ask for updates, I'm going to use the command line because I don't want it to do any updates. And after we do this, it should go ahead and reboot for us. Let's see what happens. Okay, let's log in. As soon as I remember what my password is. There you go. All right, let's check the GUI for the name. There you go. We have the name that we wanted. All right, let's go ahead and check the CLI for the name. Here's that PC20 that we wanted. Now let's double check our IP information. It's still retaining the IP address that we wanted it to have. So that's the process of setting up your client so it has a host name that you want and a static IP address. Talk to you guys later.